in Ireland. Today I'm home, back home in Philly. I did not film this part yesterday because I kind of crashed. Understandably, I went through time zone land again. Lovely time zone land. 5-hour difference. So when I was just chilling on the couch at 6 o'clock in the evening, it was actually 11 o'clock in Dublin. I was tired. Even though I gained back those hours on the clock, I kind of lived through them again, so sleep was needed. I've had plenty of sleep by now, but yesterday I didn't get much sleep the night before. I think because I was too invested in my spinning, and then I had to film another video, and it just kind of piled up the way that online time does at night. The time just goes into a vortex then. So I got like 5-ish hours of sleep. I woke up for breakfast, kind of finished the packing real quick. I went down for breakfast and I had a lot of pastries, but it was a really good breakfast. I had the pineapple juice, and a chocolate muffin, and like pain au lait, like the little croissant thing with the chocolate inside, and some of the donuts, and I think I had a banana. After that, I went back up to the room, did the brushing my teeth. Like, I left my big bag outside to be portered. So I did as close to brushing my teeth as I could because my toothbrush was in the porter bag. I brought the rest of my bags down to go on the bus. I had some recyclables. Basically, I had a bunch of the grocery store bags that I had and some plastic bottles that needed to be recycled. So we're 3 for 3 on hotels taking care of my recycled stuff, because I asked, like, hey, can you recycle some stuff for me? And they're like, yeah. So I just handed them the biggest bag filled with all the other bags, and they recycled it for me. I also had a can of Fanta left over. It's like, yeah, they're not going to let me bring this on the plane. And I don't feel like drinking any soda now, so who can I give this to? And the solution ended up being, on the bus they had a cooler where we put the water bottles, and the tour guide told me that I could just put the can of Fanta in that cooler and someone will take it. It's like, cool. I ended up having an extra can because back in Dingle, like, I forget if I mentioned this or not, but back in Dingle when I had the fresh fish, I tried to order a milkshake because it was on the menu, but they didn't tell me they didn't have it until after I already paid for it. They did the Fanta as a substitution, but because the milkshake cost more than the Fanta, they gave me 2 cans of Fanta and I only drank 1 of them. I still was carrying around this can because I didn't want to like open it up and dump it down just to recycle the metal. That would be a waste. I wanted to give it to someone who would actually drink it and enjoy it, you know? But I brought all my bags down. I had gotten another bag the day before, so I had more bags to bring down with me. And it turns out, like, you can actually see it right there, the yarn made it home. And it actually turned out that another lady from the trip also had to buy a suitcase, and she bought the exact same one. And we both didn't label it. So it's like, wow, this is going to be fun to tell apart. As it turns out, I opened the zipper to widen it up, and she did not. So that was the main thing. Also, I tend to move the combination so that way the combination is not open on the suitcase, and the other lady didn't do that. So it's like, we had 2 different ways that we could tell it apart. But I know if I'm traveling with this baby in the future, it's getting a luggage tag. During breakfast and while we were on the bus, I was showing off my finished skein to a couple different people because, like, every time I make something, that is the process. I make something and then I show it off to people. It's like, show and tell, look what I made. And then we entered the airport, and when we entered the airport, I realized that I must have packed the confirmation code in one of the suitcases, and I didn't feel like opening that back up. And it's like, how am I gonna get my luggage tag? I guess I'm gonna have to show my passport, because that confirmation code is really best to actually get the bag tag and the boarding pass and all that. That's the easiest way to do it, yeah. But as it turns out, a couple other people in the group couldn't get the luggage tag from that kiosk, and when they tried to do it, they were told to go to the line. So it's like, okay, just follow the group of people. It's like one of the great things about being on a tour on the way home is you're all in the airport at the same time, so you can kind of follow them around, and if you see them going on the same flight, because the way that this tour worked, if they provided the flight for you, the flight all went to the same place. They all went back to New York. Then you were kind of responsible for your transportation to New York. So for other people, that involved another flight. For me, it just involved a car ride home. The distance between Philadelphia and New York the car ride home and a flight home would be approximately the same amount of time. So it made more sense to drive. So we ended up going in the line, and it's like, you know what? I don't really have this here, but I have my passport. I used the passport, and it worked. The passport brought up all the information we needed, and I ended up having to pay for that bad boy there, and I had no problem paying for that bad boy, actually. I knew it was going to happen. I had like the extra carry bag of the duffel bag, which makes it the first time I remember using the overhead compartment. I might have used it on the study abroad trip, maybe. But usually when I go on an airplane, I just have like a backpack and I usually just shove it under the seat. I don't usually have another bag that I carry on with me to go on the plane, but I did this time because souvenirs. I think next time, I know when I go on an international trip with the intention to buy yarn, I should probably just bring an empty suitcase. I thought a duffel bag would be enough. It was not. We made our way to the Irish Customs. The Irish Customs is actually less strict than the US Customs because they don't force you to take down your shoes and they don't force you to dump liquids so much. They have you take your liquids out, but the liquids don't have to be in a plastic bag. I took off the belt and I took off the shoes. No, I did not take off my shoes. Like, they had a nice little system going. It was going pretty quickly. It was at a nice brisk pace. The person who, like, at my passport for the Irish Customs couldn't care less about it. It's just like, yeah, okay, he didn't force me to take off my mask, which I've noticed a lot of people who are checking my passport do. I was wearing a duck mask that day, so other people kind of got the kick about it. There's one person who was taking a picture of me, so then I did the chicken arms, and she's like, oh, do that again. Like a couple other people in the group, when they passed by me, they were going like, quack, quack. But the Irish Customs, they had like the trays, and so I put everything in the tray, and then I slid it through, and I beeped. So I got the full pat-down experience. The Irish TSA agent was very helpful. It's very friendly and considerate. Considerate is the word I'm looking for. Like, she was asking, like, can you do this for me? And then, is it alright if I do this? And like, she had to look at the bottom of my shoes, and after I beeped, it's like, oh, it's the shoes. Because on the American side, you don't really have to, you have to take off your shoes. So it doesn't really matter, like, what type of shoes that you have. But with the Irish side, you don't. So I was wondering, like, was it my shoes that caused the beep beep? So I had to take them off. Because I remembered when I used to work for Amazon, like at the warehouse, there was a time I wore those shoes to work before the safety shoes were absolutely required. And these were like still safety shoes, but they were not the safety shoes that they allowed. So sometimes they would beep when I went through a metal detector, and I would have to get stopped and searched when I left work. So it's like, oh, that's probably what set it off. Although when she waved like the wand in front of my pants, I think the button on like the pants that I wore also set off the wand, so it could have been that as well. But they were satisfied, and I had to like resort everything again. And then when I got the boarding pass from the lady back at the baggage check, she kind of crossed out the time and wrote another time. My gate said it was boarding at 10:20. She crossed out and wrote 9:20. It's like, oh, did this change? It didn't happen to many other people, but the boarding time did not change. I still had to board at 10:20 because the flight was 4:11. And it turns out we went through US Customs on the Dublin side instead of the New York side. I had to go through Customs twice within an hour of each other. And so we got, like, they didn't tell me what my gate was. Report to US Customs and we'll tell you your gate after that. So by the time we went through it, like, we saw the place for the tax return, as Ireland has this policy. I think they started the duty-free policy actually in the Shannon Airport. That was the big ploy to get people to go to Shannon Airport, was the duty-free stuff, where if you're a tourist, you don't have to pay this tax in the European Union. And they had a place where you could do it, and like, we're filling out these forms like all throughout the week, or like on that day, it's like, we're gonna try to get our refund. And they give you this card. Like, the tour gives you this card for one of the companies that does this, so you can just have it all on the same card. I ended up not having anything scanned to that card, and because all the 3 places that gave me the tax refund. All were doing it with different companies. So I had like 3 different forms I had to fill out. And when it came to it, we saw the kiosk, there was a line, and I saw that my pass had changed, and it was about 9:20, 9:30 when I saw it, and it's like, we don't have time, or are they boarding right now? We should probably hustle to the airplane, yeah? So I ended up like going to US Customs, skipping it, and now that I'm home, I'm probably not gonna bother doing the tax return because I don't feel like doing the paperwork. So European Union, I hope you appreciate my contribution to your economy. Because you're keeping it. We made it through US Customs, and I was like, oh, am I going to have to get like pat down again, take out the electronics again? And fortunately, I did not. Like, something popped up on the computer that made them satisfied with the results of the pat down that the Irish Customs did for me. So it's like I got to just go through, and I was like, oh, that was pretty smooth. And then we were able to find the gate, and turns out, no, the flight was leaving at 10:20, so I ended up staying with a couple of the ladies from the tour that I met. I agreed to wash my bag while I used the bathroom and got some more food for the flight. I got another bottle of Ribena. I also got some chips as well. We made it on the airplane. And we made it on the airplane. I saw that I ended up in an aisle seat, which was like, ooh, treat. Because usually, if I'm buying tickets for myself, I don't pay to upgrade any seats. So I usually end up with a middle seat because that's where they assign me. And it's like, I'm chill with it. I don't really mind. But the aisle seat was a nice treat. I didn't have to climb anybody on the way out in order to get to my seat. And I found out that the lady who was sitting 2 seats that way next to me on the plane was the same lady, because like she was on the tour with me. So it was like, oh hey, we get to sit near each other again. And we were in a 3-seat row this time. We were like a row back. So there was a middle seat, and as it turned out, no one came to sit in the middle seat. So we had plenty of space. It took some maneuvering to figure out which TV was ours because it was like a 4-seat row in front of us. Unfortunately, the screens that introduce the electronics, they show what seat is attached to it. So it was like, okay, it's that screen. I just took out my knitting. It's like, we're just going to knit. I'm not going to bother sleeping because I'm headed back home. I don't really care if I'm awake. It's not like in Ireland where it's like, we're going to start our first day of touring. It's like, no, I'm allowed to be a little bit out of it. The screen for the other ladies didn't pop up, but the screen next to it did. And since there wasn't the middle seat there, she just plugged her headsets into that. And they did provide the headsets, but the headsets had a different type of plug that I wasn't able to really put into anything else. So I left the headsets there when I finished the flight. Unlike the other flight where I took the headsets with me because the headsets were a little bit more interchangeable. I got to enjoy quite a few movies, and they fed me 3 times. They brought me a little bag of pretzels at the beginning along with some water, and then they brought me a meal. So I had like chicken with rice, and the milk came in like a condiment bag. It was like the same type of bag that you would expect ketchup to be in, or like yogurt. Yogurt would be more accurate, like a short little yogurt. At first I was wondering, like, it's strange that milk's being given this way. Like, I don't have any coffee or tea. But then I realized, like, no, the milk was just meant to be drunk straight, and there's like a raspberry white chocolate mousse, and there was some bread with butter, and there was a pasta salad. It was all pretty good. Like, some parts of the meal were better than others, but it was good. It was like nice and filling. And then later on, they came with an afternoon tea. So you like open it up. There was no actual tea involved. That was a separate thing. And I mean, I don't really drink tea or coffee. I only drink tea if it's cold. And I've tried to like coffee many times, but it just hasn't clicked. So I've just had to accept that about myself. Although I like the smell of coffee. But they brought like an afternoon tea. It had like a cheese and coleslaw sandwich. And it had like a little flapjack, like the Irish type of flapjack. And it's like, oh, this is so cute. So I wasn't starving when I came off the plane. Even though I also did like take out a Cliff Bar and have like the last Cliff Bar that I brought. And I still had some of the water that I brought too. Like, I bought some water after I went through both sets of customs. I ended up watching 3 movies. So I got to watch A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Mr. Rogers movie. It was pretty good. Although it was a little bit too emotional for an airplane. Like, it made me want to cry. It's like, I don't want to cry on this airplane. But it was a very well done movie. And oh my gosh, I want to watch it so much again. It was like so wholesome. And then with that, I watched Kinky Boots. It was the first time seeing Kinky Boots, and it was a good movie, although I couldn't hear anything. Like, if I had the choice, I would put on the subtitles, and I got the subtitles for the Mr. Rogers movie, but the Kinky Boots did not have any subtitles on it. And so I'm pressing the button, wondering, like, why is this not going up? Why can't I hear anything? I didn't realize what was going on all throughout Kinky Boots, so I'm kind of just relying on the visual part to tell me the story. But it wasn't until I started the next movie, which was Mansfield Park, that I realized that the reason why the sound wasn't changing was because I was trying to increase the brightness and not the sound. And I was like, oh. So I pushed it up and I was able to hear Mansfield Park a little bit better. I mean, it wasn't that bad. It was a nice story. Like, I completely understand why the protagonist acted the way she did. It was understandable. And boy, I mean, it's set in like 1806. But the characters are timeless. It's like, oh. It makes me kind of want to read Mansfield Park, which I know I have because my dad left the Jane Austen book in my bookshelf when I was younger. And I use it mostly to press flowers. I also did play some games on it too because games are available. So I played some Bejeweled, which I was getting better as time went on. But it's like, as fun and addicting as that game is, I know pretty much any game that ends up on my phone eventually gets deleted, and it doesn't last very long, so it's like, this is just a nice plain treat. This is not something that we're going to go download. Although there were a couple times, like, during the movies where I was a little extra suspense because, or the person in front of me reached behind and, like, her hands were in front of the screen, and, like, the X of the screen is at the really top corner of the screen, and her fingers were going really close, and it's like, I could tell her fingers were affecting my screen, so it's like, I hope she doesn't press that button. Fortunately, she did not. Like, I also played Sudoku on the screen too, and the Sudoku, like, I stayed on the easy level. It was pretty fun. And then the plane landed in New York, and like, everyone got up when the plane got up, but the lady sitting in the same row with me, she's like, yeah, I'm gonna try to knit through 2 more rows. It's gonna take that long. It's like, yeah, you know, I'll join you. I made like another toad to my froggy during the time that I was waiting. Because, I mean, we were in row 42. There were like 41 rows that had to be cleared out in front of us before we got the time to actually get out. Because we left the customs in New York, where I was able to just go right out, go straight to the baggage claim, and then my bags popped up pretty quickly. They were also right next to each other too, which was pretty nice. I stopped by the bathroom there, and then I was able to exit right out, and I was right at the passenger pickup. When I was at the passenger pickup, pretty much just texted both my parents, like, hey, I'm here. I'm at this location. They came very shortly after, and we started on the ride home. So Mom was very chatty. They stayed in a hotel the night before, and apparently it was a very cheap hotel. They got what they paid for because it was a cheap price, but it also did not have accommodations that you would typically expect in hotels. We stopped by a rest stop on the way home to get some food. With an hour or so left to the trip, like at the point where, you know, the radio switched from New York stations to Philly stations, we started listening to the baseball game on the radio. We arrived home with half of the baseball game to spare, and I kind of stayed up for the baseball game, but towards the end I was just tired, and right afterwards I went to bed, and that was the last day of Ireland. And you know what? I'm very glad I went to Ireland. I'm very glad I went on this trip. Like, I could go back and spend a longer period of time there. I could see myself living there. I definitely see myself going back to visit because I did not spend enough time in Dublin. I would want to spend more time in Dublin. But it was also like a long enough trip for this trip. Like, towards the time I was doing like the last sightseeing in Dublin, it's like, okay, I'm ready to go back home and relax for a couple days. I'm ready to not be in tourist mode. But it was a good trip, and I got to do some things that I'm very glad I got to do. I also got to meet some people that I'm very glad to have met because, like, I was with a tour group, and the tour group pretty much got along with each other. I mean, there were a couple groups of people who hung out together because they they knew each other from before the trip. But there was a lot of intermingling going on, and like everyone was very friendly. When you're the youngest person in the group and they know that you're traveling alone, a lot of the other people of the group are looking out for you, which was very nice. And like our tour guide was amazing, Agnes. She was a very friendly, warm, and caring individual. There were times where people were just not feeling well, and she was definitely looking out for them. And our tour guide, Dominic, he was very knowledgeable. Like, not only was he driving the bus very carefully, but he was able to give us a lot of the background information of Ireland to help accent the trips. Even though we did spend a lot of time sitting in the bus watching the countryside go by, it wasn't just like watching a television show about Ireland. It was kind of just seeing it change gradually and seeing the little bits and pieces that were there. Now, granted, it was a group tour. Obviously, there were places that I would have liked to stay longer, and there were other places where it's like, did we have to spend that much time? Like, we did end up shopping more than I personally would have shopped if I was traveling by myself. But I'm also okay with that, though, for this trip, because part of the trip was seeing what yarn was there, and I did happen to buy yarn every day I was there, and I did get to learn more about yarn. And especially since this was a themed tour, this was a tour about knitting, I could definitely start talking about knitting with all the different people that were on the tour, and like have people who I know would be okay listening to me just rattle on and on about the different types of yarn and whatnot. There are also parts of Ireland that I was just very happy to experience. Like, I enjoyed trying the different brands of food that I couldn't see back home. Something else that I also appreciated was there are no sensor toilets in Ireland. There are toilets, and they all have like different flush-like things, so you can actually determine how much water goes down, whether you want just a little bit of water to flush or whether you know it's going to need a lot. You walk around the United States to pretty much any industrial type of building, and they're going to have a sensor toilet, and I dislike sensor toilets. Even though they are like the first smart devices that were created, they are very dumb, and they don't always flush when you want them to flush, and sometimes they just won't flush, or sometimes they will flush repeatedly if you bend down too far, which is something that happens because period blood. But with Ireland, there were no sensor toilets, so I was very glad for the toilets to be predictable. Also, Ireland is better at recycling. Walking around, there aren't any trash cans around the street. Like, there's not really too many places where you can throw stuff out if you're just walking around in a city center. You gotta carry your trash with you. But despite that, there wasn't really litter around the place. Even though like there were a lot more smokers than you would see in the United States, there weren't cigarette butts everywhere. Like, I don't remember seeing a lot of cigarette butts on the ground like I did when I was in Italy. But when I did come across trash cans in public places, several times it wasn't just trash, it was also recycling, and sometimes there were composts. And when they had like these multi-trash cans with the recycling, compost, and general trash, they actually had separate trash bags inside, so that way you know they're going to separate places. Unlike many places in the US where they have separate recycling and trash openings, but they're going to the same bag. In particular, I'm calling you out, Las Vegas Airport. And like every time when I asked the hotel if they could recycle things for me, they did. They at least took it away to get recycled. Yeah, that was a very good trip to Ireland. Anyway, that was today's entertainment. Have a nice day.